Back to Shabbat services for October 10th, 2020, Tishri 22, 5781. Also, this is Sukkot 8 and Shemini Atzeret today is what we are observing. We are going to begin the Torah portion, and we're going to be reading out of the book of Deuteronomy, beginning with chapter 14, verse 22, and going all the way through to chapter 16, verse 8. Okay, so Deuteronomy 14, starting with verse 22. This segment is entitled Tithe and Remember the Levite. You will surely set aside a tenth of all the yield of your seeding that comes from the field year by year. You are to eat the tithe of your grain, your new wine, your oil, and the firstborn of your herd and flock before Adonai your God in the place he chooses to make his name, in the place he chooses to make his name dwell, so that you may learn to fear Adonai your God always. Now suppose the way is too long for you cannot carry the tithe, because the place Adonai your God chooses to set his name is too far from you. When Adonai your God blesses you, then you are to exchange the tithe for silver. Bind up the silver in your hand and go to the place that Adonai your God chooses. You may spend the money for whatever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, or whatever your soul asks of you. Then you will eat there before Adonai your God and rejoice, you and your household. But you are not to neglect the Levite within your gates, for he has no portion of inheritance with you. At the end of every 3 years, you are to bring out all the tithe of your produce in that year and store it within your gates. Then the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, along with the outsider, the orphan, and the widow within your gates, will come and eat and be satisfied, so that Adonai your God may bless you in all the work of your hand that you do. Shemitah, cancellation of debts, is chapter 15. At the end of every 7 years, you are to cancel debts. This is how you are to cancel debts. Every creditor is to release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He must not force his neighbor or his brother to repay, for Adonai's debt cancellation has been proclaimed. Now imagine the banks wouldn't like that very much. Um, a foreigner you may force, but your hand is to release whatever your brother owes you. However, there should be no poor among you, for Adonai will surely bless you in the land Adonai your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess. If only you would carefully listen to the voice of Adonai your God, being careful to do all these mitzvah that I am commanding you today. For Adonai your God will bless you as he promised you. So you will lend to many nations, but not borrow. You will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. If there is a poor man among you, any of your brothers within any of your gates, in your land that Adonai your God is giving you, you are not to harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother. Rather, you must surely open your hand to him, and you must surely lend him enough for his need, whatever he is lacking. Watch yourself so there is no unworthy thing in your heart, saying, the seventh year of canceling debts is near, and your eye is evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing. Then he may call out to Adonai against you, and it will be a sin upon you. You must surely give to him, and your heart is not to be grieved when you give to him. For because of this thing, Adonai your God will bless you in all your work and in every undertaking of your hand. For there will never cease to be poor people in the land. Therefore I am commanding you, saying, you must surely open your hand to your brother, to your needy and poor in your land. If your fellow Hebrew, a man or woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the seventh year you are to set him free. When you set him free, you are not to send him away empty-handed. You are to surely provide for him from your flock and threshing floor and winepress. As Adonai your God has blessed you, you are to give to him. You will remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God redeemed you. Therefore I am commanding you this thing today. Now, If he tells you, I will not go away from you because he loves you and your household, since he is well off with you, then you are to take an awl and put it through his ear to the door, and he will be your servant forever. And to your female slave you are to do the same. It should not seem hard to you when you set him free from you, for he has served you 6 years, double the value of a hired worker. So Adonai, your God, will bless you in all that you do. All the firstborn males that are born in your herd and your flock, you are to consecrate to Adonai your God. You are to do no work with the firstborn of your herd, or shear the firstborn of your flock. You are to eat it before Adonai your God year after year in the place Adonai chooses, you and your household. But if it has any blemish, if it is lame or blind or has any serious blemish, you are not to sacrifice it to Adonai your God. You are to eat it within your gates, the unclean and the clean together, just as they eat the gazelle or deer. Only its blood you are not to eat. You must pour it out on the ground like water. And chapter 16. 3 harvest festivals. Observe the month of Aviv, and keep the Passover to Adonai your God. For in the month of Aviv, Adonai your God brought you out from Egypt by night. You are to sacrifice the Passover offering to Adonai your God from the flock and the herd in the place Adonai chooses to make his name dwell. You are not to eat hametz with it. For 7 days you are to eat matzah with it, the bread of affliction, for you came out from the land of Egypt in haste. Do this so that all the days of your life you will remember the day when you came out from the land of Egypt. No hametz should be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days, and none of the meat you sacrifice in the evening of the first day may be left overnight until morning. You may not sacrifice the Passover offering within any of your gates that Adonai your God is giving you. Rather, at the place that Adonai your God chooses to make his name dwell there, you will sacrifice the Passover offering in the evening at sunset, the time of your coming out from Egypt. You are to cook and eat it at the place Adonai your God chooses. Then you will turn around in the morning and journey home. For 6 days you are to eat matzah. On the seventh day there is to be a solemn gathering for Adonai your God. On it you are to do no work. And we're going to continue on. I know I said 16 verse 8. I meant actually 17. 7 weeks you are to count for yourself from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. You will begin to count 7 weeks. Then you will keep the feast of Shabbat to Adonai your God with a measure of freewill offering from your hand, which you are to give according to how Adonai your God blesses you. So you will rejoice before Adonai your God in the place Adonai your God chooses to make his name dwell. You, your son and daughter, slave and maid, Levite, and outsider, orphan and widow in your midst, you will remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you are to take care and do these statutes. You are to keep the feast of Sukkot for 7 days, after gathering in the produce from your threshing floor and winepress. So you will rejoice in your feast, you, your son and daughter, slave and maid, Levite and outsider, orphan and widow within your gates 7 days. You will feast to Adonai, your God, in the place he chooses, because Adonai your God will bless you in all your produce, in all your work, in all the work of your hand, and you will be completely filled with joy. 3 times a year, all your males are to appear before Adonai your God in the place he chooses at the feast of Matzah, the feast of Shabbat, and the feast of Sukkot. No one should appear before Adonai empty-handed. The gift of each man's hand, according to the blessing of Adonai your God, has given you. And then the final reading for the Torah is Numbers. In the book of Numbers, chapter 29, we are reading from 35 to 40. On the 8th day there shall be for you an assembly. You are to do no regular work. You are to offer to Adonai a burnt offering, a fire offering, a pleasing aroma, 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, a year old without defect. and their grain and drink offerings with a bull, ram, and lamb corresponding to their number according to the regulations, and a goat for a sin offering, besides the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. You are to prepare these for Adonai at your Moedim in addition to your vow and freewill offerings, along with your burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offering, and fellowship offering. So Moses told Bnei Israel all that Adonai commanded Moses. So we're speaking of the eighth day, the one that we are on right now. What was done in biblical days when there was sacrificing going on, this is what happened. So we're just going to recap on this. Um, as we read in Deuteronomy, a tenth of all the produce was to be eaten in Jerusalem or else exchanged for money with which the food is purchased and eaten there. Um, if, as I had read, if you could not travel to where the Lord wanted you to travel, where He put His name, for certain years, this tithe is given to the poor instead. Firstborn cattle, sheep are to be offered in the temple, and their meat eaten by the Kohen, which is the priest. And the mitzvah of charity obligates a Jew to aid a needy fellow with a gift or loan. And on the seventh year, all loans are to be forgiven. All debt is released. So all indentured servants are to be set free after 6 years of service. The portion then mentions the laws of the three pilgrimage festivals, and we talked about that as well. So, and Adonai declares that the eighth day will be the festival of Shemini Atzeret, when bullock is offered, and I had mentioned everything as I read through Numbers, 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old without defect, and their grain and drink offerings with bull, ram, and lamb corresponding to their number, according to the regulations, and a goat for sin offering, besides the regular burnt offering with its grain and drink offerings. And then what was to be prepared is a vow and free will offerings, along with the burnt offerings, grain, drink, and fellowship offerings. So that is basically Shemini Atzeret, and that is the Parashat that we read in the Torah portion. So we're going to go to the Haftorah, and in the Haftorah we're going to be going to 1 Kings chapter 8, 54, starting with verse 54, and we're going to go to the end of this chapter. When Solomon finished praying this entire prayer and petition to Adonai, he arose from before the altar of Adonai, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread out towards heaven. Then he stood and blessed all the congregation of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be Adonai, who has given rest to his people Israel, according to all that he promised. Not a single word has failed of all his good promise, which he promised by the hand of Moses, his servant. May Adonai Eloheinu be with us, as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us. May he incline our hearts to him, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his mitzvot, his statutes, and his ordinances, which he commanded our fathers. May these words of mine, with which I have made supplication before Adonai, be near Adonai Eloheinu day and night, so that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, as each day requires. May all the peoples of the earth know that Adonai, he is God. There is no other. Let your heart therefore be wholly devoted to Adonai Eloheinu, to walk in his statutes, and to keep his commandments as it is today. Now the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before Adonai. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to Adonai, 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of Adonai. On that same day, the king consecrated the middle of the court that was before the house of Adonai, for there he offered the burnt offering, and the grain offering, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. Because the bronze altar that was before Adonai was too small to accommodate the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. So Solomon and all Israel with him celebrated the festival at that time. A great congregation from the entrance of Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt before Adonai Eloheinu 7 days, and then 7 more days, 14 days in all. On the 8th day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went to their tents, joyful and glad of heart, over all the goodness that Adonai had shown to his servant David and to his people Israel. And that's the reading of the Haftorah. So actually, we were talking about the dedication of the very first holy temple that was built by King Solomon. It was exquisite. It was built to the hilt. All the fine gold, all the cedar wood, and everything that went into it. It was so intricately put together, and God gave him um, the design as well as empowered all of um, all of the workmen and the craftsmen to do this. So this was a dedication. The dedication was a 7-day festive affair. Okay, festive, meaning Sukkot is festive too. Immediately followed by the 7 festive days of the holiday of Sukkot. So that there was another 7 days that went on in this during this time frame when Solomon built the first temple. But on the 8th day, which is Shemini, Atzeret, Solomon sent the people off to their homes. And the reading immediately opens after King Solomon concluded a very lengthy public prayer to Adonai. He then blesses the assembled people and encourages them to follow Adonai's will, observe the commandments, and it is this blessing that occupies the bulk of the entire, the whole reading of the Haftarah. So the king then blesses the holy temple by bringing various offerings, peace offerings, burnt offerings, meal and fat offerings, and then on the 8th day he dismisses the people, and they blessed the king and went to their homes, rejoicing, delighted of heart for all the goodness that Adonai that has brought to David his servant and for all Benaiah Israel. So that is the end of the Haftorah portion. And may God bless the reading of his holy Torah and the Haftorah. And I'm going to close this in prayer. We're going to take a short break and then come back with the second part of Shabbat services, which is going to be the Brit Hadashah. And I will also have an altar call as well, as I always do with every service. Father God, thank you. Thank you once again for this time. As your temple was blessed and the people were blessed, um, they understood that it was you that gave rest to your people. It was you that made that even possible that the temple could be built. It was you that brought them to that occasion. And it is you that brings us to this occasion today. We glorify you, Father, for all that you do. Each and every day is made by you and is special because you have made it for us. Adonai, we thank you. We thank you so much for this time together, this time that we spent in your word, learning in your word, and your word touching our hearts and our souls and our minds and becoming a part of who we are, your children. We bless you. We bless your name. We lift your name on high. In the mighty name of Yeshua, Jesus. Amen and amen. Take a short break and come back. We're going to, as I said, do the second part of Shabbat services, and that will be the Brit Kadashah, and we will also do an altar call.